Hey y'all, welcome back to Steel and Style. And for, our listeners south of the border, that'd be Steel E-Style. So, we're very culturally inclusive here.
At least a
Uh,
third of the words.
well, right. And see, I like those people down there because they like Super 38s and I like Super 38s. So we get
There's a
along.
few
And
on your
low
wall.
riders. And
And
low
low
riders.
riders. Yeah, no, you fit right in.
So with that, welcome back to the podcast. We hope that this can ease your day as you go about your mundane tasks. You can hear us ramble about guns and style and just, whatever happens to hit our brains at this particular moment. Before we get too far into it, of course, as if you're new here, I hope you're not, but if you are, Eli here, Eli Duckworth of 1776 Duck, and of course my co-host
Caleb over at Commando Bond.
Yeah, Caleb at Commando Bond. And before we get too far into the sauce, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Of course, if you haven't bought Caleb's book, Licensed Troubleshooter, what is wrong with you? I mean, really, at this point, it's your own fault. And
If you
so,
missed the
Caleb,
pre-sale, like how do you even go about your day?
dude, I bought two of them. Now that was one of those was to trade to get you a set of books.
And those ranking books,
Right.
talk about the trade of everyone says that Trump's the guy, the art of the deal, and you're over here just knocking it out of the park.
Well, so I got those, but Caleb, tell everybody because it's not on Kickstarter anymore.
That's correct.
You've missed that honor of getting it on Kickstarter. Now it's on Headstamp, correct?
It's on the Headstamp website now, yeah. So you can buy it there for pre-sale until we actually ship, and then of course it'll just be there for sale like normal. And the book is anticipated to ship, call it April, May of 25. We're buttoning up the last bits now, getting it over to the publisher, getting our demo copies and all that cool stuff. So yeah, and then of course follow along with me and Headstamp on Instagram, because as we get pieces, we'll be teasing and sharing and all that stuff as well.
And if there is nothing more I love than teasing and sharing, let's just be honest with you. So, and then we also do have to, of course, we want to thank our biggest sponsor, Guns.com. Caleb and I both are big fans of Guns.com, or as we might say, Guns website.
Yes.
You may, we may not refer to GDC in their full capacity. This will probably be the last episode where you actually hear that full title because we're due to the algorithm on YouTube specifically. Spotify, it's not an issue, but on YouTube specifically, it may cause a problem in the future. So this will be the last episode where you hear that. Any other time, and from here forward, you'll hear it Guns or Guns website. Something
you'll hear
like
a lot about certified used. Like if you don't know what we're talking about when we say those things, I don't know, where you've been.
Of course, yeah. And speaking of certified used, speaking of certified used, okay.
Yeah, let's take a moment to talk about certified.
Typically, the ad reads are going to be pretty quick, right? But here's the deal.
This is actually a segment today, as far as I'm concerned.
Guns website, okay. It's one that plagues the existence of Caleb and I on a constant basis.
Oh yeah.
So Caleb has actually picked up two revolvers.
Yeah, adding to the wheel gun
certified
family.
Used. You have a second model hand ejector.
Second model hand ejector, 455. British Lend-Lease gun with all the proof marks, matching serials, the whole. It is beautiful, beautiful piece. And then a clearly never been fired based on the breech face barrel and everything else. Colt Police Positive Special, the 38 Special variant. And it's a mid-60s variant. I mean, the gun is in good shape when the checkering on the grip is just as tactile as it probably was fresh out of the box in the 60s. Like, there's no wear on the grip panels, nothing on the bluing. And I got to tell you guys,
that gun doesn't even have any markings on the breech face, does it?
No, the breech face is immaculate. This gun came without a box, but as far as I'm concerned, it's got to be just fresh out of the box kind of situation. Yeah. But, to placate the folks or to dispel the non-believers, I guess is a better way to put it. Both of those guns were in the beautiful, beautiful sub 500 range. So
which is nuts.
It's crazy. Insane.
Well, I just got a couple of guns, not in the sub 500.
No.
Not in the sub $500 range. Got a Colt single action army, a real deal. I'm talking dream gun
In the box.
in the box. That gun is a second generation single action army, which I'll be honest with you, kind of the best. There's nothing wrong with a new manufactured one. There's nothing wrong with obviously a first generation, but the second generation Colt single action army is really a true celebration of single action army. And what it does is allow you to have modern manufacturing and modern kind of steel quality, really,
Mm-hmm.
but on a gun that was still made the way they used to. There was a break in single action army production, of course, World War II. There wasn't much call for single action armies in World War II.
Colt had a few things other to make.
Yeah, they had a few other guns they were producing at the time. And so in 1956, of course, with some of the other manufacturers having a lot of success with big bore 45 caliber single action pistols, and of course, not only that, but the kind of
I think Cowboy Renaissance.
Yeah, the Cowboy Renaissance. I was going to say the interest in the Old West, but we really did have this era of Americans really looking back to the Old West for identity in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 1956, Colt reintroduced the single action army. This gun is a 57 in the box. And I already have, of course, because you know how Caleb and I are, I already have the 1957, or excuse me, it's a 1958 or 59 catalog to go with the gun. I have a 57 advertisement, Colt Single Action Army advertisement to go with the gun. So you got to have these things, right? Like,
well, the vintage advertising, the vintage packaging, the vintage manuals, all of these pieces are. First of all, you can actually find them on eBay for not that much money if you spend some time hunting, because most people don't really care or know what they have, unfortunately. And the ones that do, just don't buy those. Buy from the dude that doesn't really care or know, and you'll be very satisfied. I mean, I've built half of my collection and most of the clothing that I wear off of sub $100 items on eBay.
Yeah, and so I picked up that Colt, and then of course, right before we got on this podcast, I was waiting on Caleb to send me the link, and I thought, well, I'll go through the guns website.
Which, to clarify, Eli's over here like it plagues us constantly. He and I were talking while working yesterday and going through the certified used together. So, to hear that something else had been dropped in less than 24 hours later was kind of a shocking pleasure.
And it was not there. It was not there yesterday. So I'm going through doing my thing, waiting on Caleb, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh, I want to know, because I like to pick out a gun for y'all and be like, hey, this is a good, cool gun. You should check it out. Well, I ended up getting the cool gun I was going to tell y'all to check. A Remington UMC.
How many of those were made, Eli?
1911. 20,000 of those. A little bit of fun history about the Remington UMC. So these guns were basically built as auxiliary to Colt's production of the model of 1911. As with any war, especially in the 20th century, Colt was pretty heavily laden with manufacturing duties, not just 1911. That was not the only thing they were making during World War I. And so coming close to, in 1918, the U.S. High Command kind of says, we need more guns. And this is when you see the model of 1917 Smith & Wessons and Colts, the revolvers that shoot 45 ACP, essentially a converted new service and a converted second model hand ejector for Smith & Wesson. You see those be introduced as auxiliary pistols because the United States doctrine that they wanted to have, they've never actually achieved this, but they wanted every soldier to have a handgun because, of course, Americans want every soldier to have a handgun, right? Like, we're a more handgun-centric society than any other military has ever been. Not only military, just any other people's has ever been. Americans are handgun-centric. I don't care what anyone tells you. The handgun is the American gun. And so we're getting ready. We're getting spooled up. Of course, Springfield Armory, not Springfield Armory.
Correct. Isn't it annoying that we always have to make that concession
Armory we know.
Clarification?
the United States Arsenal at Springfield Armory,
The old
Massachusetts.
flaming bomb.
Correct. They were making Colt 1911s to supplement 1911 production, of course. And even then, with the both Colt and Smith and Wesson model 1917s in production, with Colt building the at this point the Colt 1918 version of the 1911 was probably the quickest version of a 1911 that they had made at that time. We're talking about they went away from ball cuts, and they didn't call them ball cuts back then, but that's the easiest way for me to picture what they had. So they went away for the scallops that are more traditional in today's world. They went away for that. They had moved their markings. They used to have like the Colt pony separate from the regular roll mark, so it had to be stamped separately. They actually included the pony in the roll mark and decided to roll in just one roll on the slide versus having two, which is always funny because it's like you could have just left the pony out, right? But nope, not Colt. And so, anyways, they had already, I don't want to say the word isn't cheapened, but they had already sped up manufacturing as much as they could, and they still couldn't keep up. So Remington UMC came in to start also building pistols. And all of this was because they were trying to get as many arms, ammunition, and soldiers into Europe for the spring 1919 offensive. That was the goal. In 1918, the Allied High Command was preparing for the spring 1919 offensive. That was going to be an all-out, rush into Germany. And of course, no one actually, one of the kind of few times in history where an enemy capitulated pretty much unexpectedly. It's not, when we look at it at this point in history, we can see the writing was definitely on the wall. Germany was crumbling from the inside out, essentially.
Right. And that's the point, though, right? Like, we didn't have a dissemination of information. You didn't know what was happening inside. And so from the outside, it really did felt like it was going to be either an extreme war of attrition that had already been happening for that extended period of time, or it was going to be a extreme bloodbath, pushing as hard as you can and beating them with a stick until they're done.
Well, and it's interesting too, because Germany had some recent success on the Western Front, because of course in 1917 when Russia had basically bowed out because of the Russian Revolution, thanks a lot,
communists ruin everything, man.
Yeah, communists ruin everything. And they basically were now shipping all of those Eastern Front German soldiers to the West. All your guys in Austro-Hungary who were tied up in the war with Russia, they're coming west. And so it was one of those things where they really didn't expect the war to end the way it did, but it did. And of course, that also resulted in like my 1917, which is a commercial gun. Of course, they built all these parts for these guns, and now there was no war for them. And well, the government's not going to buy them now. And so what do? We sell them to the commercial market. But the Remington UMC company, getting back to that gun, was just another supplement company for the 1911. However, I believe, with the exception, and I could be so wrong on this, actually, you know what? We don't have someone looking stuff up for us. I kind of want to see if they are one of the least manufactured 1911s. You know what I'm saying? Like the 20,000, but I want to see how many Springfield Armory did. So bear with us, listeners. Bear with us, viewers, as James May would say.
Maybe someday we'll have a Jamie.
Yeah, that would make things a lot easier. It looks like Springfield Armory was at 25,000 pistols.
Well, there you go. You can say with somewhat credibility that Remington UMC is likely the lowest manufacturer.
It's likely the lowest. Yeah, so that's really cool. And
again, that was on the guns website, certified used. Just kind of showed up.
Yeah, I know. The only hit to it, and really this truly is it, is the grips are not correct. Guns.com did have something on the bottom where they said that this was used in World War II by the gentleman's grandfather who they bought it from. I cannot understand why people sell their grandparents' guns from the Great Wars. Okay, I cannot understand that.
But you know what? Kudos to guns, right? Because they are, and this is not a dig on them at all, but they are in essence the internet equivalent of the local pawn shop that someone just drops off their dad's guns at because they
Yep.
just want to get rid of them, right? And so because of the name, it's the first thing that crops up. You know, it's genius SEO, genius marketing. It's the phone book version. It's literally Guns website, right? And so this guy wants to get rid of his grandfather's or father's or whatever wartime gun, but he goes to the most convenient place, gets an offer, and just gets rid of it.
Well, and you and I both know, and I promise viewers that we'll get on to our topic of conversation, but this is interesting. You and I both know selling guns is a pain in the ass. It is the most pain in the ass. Unless the only time it's not is if somebody comes over to your house that you're
Yep.
friends with.
Yeah,
You're like,
friends or
oh, man,
family.
really, I gotta have that gun. How much you want for it? Okay, that's easy.
Yep.
But for me to say, oh man, I don't want this gun anymore. Now I have to go to gun stores, and that's a pain in the ass. And
Or do a
dude,
person-to-person sale and meet someone at a
yeah,
Quick Trip parking lot. I've done
it's
that a
just
couple times.
it's just not it's not something that is enjoyable, and it's something that like I want that process to be as
Just
convenient
painless
as
and
possible.
convenient, right?
Yeah.
Well,
And
especially
GD,
if you know what you're going to do with that afterwards. Like the reality is, especially if you're in the kind of space that we're in, I'm going to get rid of this to probably get something else. So, you know, GDC makes it really easy. I've done a couple through and you've done the same. And I don't really sell a lot of firearms. But when I do, it's kind of just reigniting, cycling through. You get a better deal, obviously, if you do the credit for them on the site, which, again, we're
yeah,
telling you all the amazing things on certified use to tell you that, you know, it's probably not a bad idea to let that float in that
dude.
account.
Let's be honest, y'all. Okay, I'm talking just between us, just in the last month. We'll say month.
Yeah, we'll
Well,
say
no,
30 days.
I got that naval Luger
Yeah,
not even a month ago.
yeah.
So we're talking 1917 naval Luger. We're talking second generation boxed single action Army. We're talking Remington UNC M1911. We're talking second model hand ejector 455 with all the Brit marks. We're talking a literally, I don't believe it's ever been fired,
I don't believe
at
it either.
least positive from the 60s, you know. And guess what? There's still shit on there that if you
Yes,
said,
there's
"Hey,"
plenty for everyone.
in fact, if you want me to give you a gun on there that's pretty badass that I am going to try not to get, um, there is the Cody Firearms commemorative model
Yeah.
1895 Winchester.
Yep.
Gorgeous, engraved, gold inlaid, and guess what caliber it is? 405 Winchester. Big medicine, baby. So if you want to live out your Teddy Roosevelt dreams, I think that, that's going to be the gun you need to pick up. And with that, that's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about today, because we're talking about pocket guns. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is Big Medicine and Teddy Roosevelt got anything to do with,
Yeah. How does that compete with like 25 ACP?
yeah, 25s and 32s? Well, guess what gun Teddy Roosevelt loved to carry, and carried a lot when he was in White House?
Do tell.
The FN model 1900 32 ACP. And it was gangster, dude.
That's a super cool gun.
If y'all are listening to this, go into your next tab, tap in Teddy Roosevelt's model 1900 FN. It is a fully engraved, pearl gripped, FN model 1900. And I think that honestly is the best way to start it out, because the FN 1900 is essentially the gun that created the market we're going to talk about today.
100%.
There wasn't a automatic pocket gun market at all. And in fact, that gun spurred every other company that was interested in civilian firearms into making a gun like it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, as you may or may not know, that gun kind of Colt, who was very interested in military handguns at the time, they looked over across the sea and saw that FN was selling a lot of FN 1900s. So many to the fact of when other companies would make small caliber automatics, that Europeans just referred to them as Brownings.
Yeah, it's just a Browning pistol, right? And
Right.
I think it's interesting for folks that might not be familiar, especially with the pre-war Europe, right? Because the post-war Europe is we're very well known for I'm actually reading this horrible article in one of my late 50s guns magazines about British Lend-Lease guns and what happened to them after the war, right? Talking about these guns just literally being shoveled into steam burners and into coal fires to be melted down and smelted and stuff. So kind of crazy how that all that happens. So you go from them buying it in so much bulk that the Americans actually adopt something to it not existing at all. Kind of wild.
Right. No, it's absolutely an interesting piece of history. You know, when you think about the evolution of the pocket gun and how essentially I mean, listen, okay, you don't have to go far with me to find a reason that John Browning is the greatest.
We are 1 degree of separation from that on about every 2-minute basis.
But it's so interesting to me that the
guy was a business machine. I mean, he basically sold the same design on either side of the pond, had exclusive rights with both, and was hand over fist doing that. And then he was designing so much that even when he's supposed to be on his Mormon missions or in church or whatever, he's still designing guns and doing things against the church. And they told him on his mission trip he's not supposed to be working at all. And he's still mailing blueprints to his guys back at home and saying, "Get to work."
Well, and he literally created the small automatic market. A little fun sidebar with that part about him working on his mission. It's funny because no one ever admits that he was working on his mission. Like that's not something that's something that they talk about a lot, of course, for obvious reasons. It wasn't until FN started looking back at the letters and comparing them to when he was supposed to be on mission that they went,
like, hang on.
I think he was on mission. And, very interesting for sure. But anywho.
Well, speaking about him developing that market, right? I think one thing that you and I have talked about in other mediums before that is definitely worth noting is not only did he pioneer the small automatic concealed carry market that we know today, he also had a very fond and favorable opinion on the technical know-how and handling of the civilian shooter versus the military shooter that no one else had really discussed. I'll let you talk about that, but I think that to me is the most fascinating thing is where, manuals of arms were so dictated at the time to the lowest common denominator. The assumption that you're going to injure yourself, you don't know how to handle your tool, and that is what it is. The civilian marketplace was a complete 180 of that. It really was this is your primary defensive tool. You will be carrying it loaded. And in fact, not only will you be carrying it loaded, you'll be carrying it how, Eli?
Yeah, cocked and locked. So let's move into our first gun of the pocket gun
absolutely
series. Great segues on all these. That's the Colt 1903. In my opinion, the greatest pocket gun of all time. And I know a lot of people are going to have they're going to contest that, obviously, which is fine. You could be wrong. I don't care.
There's a lot of people that like J-frames out there that are just going to be wrong.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, absolutely. And so to me, the Colt 1903/1908, I'm going to include the 380 here because There's no sense in I prefer the 32 of the two just because I like 32 auto. I have
similar.
a 380. I have a 380 because, of course, but I have two 380s actually, but I prefer a 32 because 32 is just it's so fun to shoot. But when I kind of refer to these Colt Model M's, it's going to be a little bit of we're going to include both the 380 and the 32 together. So let's clear that up. But the Colt Model M, the Colt 1903-08, it's such a fantastic gun. And it is a result of that, hey, FN is selling a shit ton of guns to civilians for carrying. Maybe we should too, because we're not making any money on the military side.
Yep.
We're not making any money, And so he came up, and funny enough, this is another example of Browning being a freaking business genius. There is two versions of a 1903 that you might find. One will be a Colt 1903, the other will be an FN 1903. Funny enough, this is so crazy. FN looked at Colt and was like, oh, we need to be building a military handgun. It was very much the guy, it's like
keeping up with the Joneses, right? It's the two neighbors, and it's just like scaling each other up. And who's profiting? John Moses.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was happy to do it too. So he took this exact same design, pretty much scaled
Mm-hmm.
it up to 9mm Browning and a bigger
Yeah,
gun
it's
with
what
lineage.
921 Lang or whatever is 9mm
Yeah,
Browning.
yeah,
Yeah,
some weird cartridge like that.
I only know that because it was a Bond gun.
Oh, of course it was. But he scaled it up, and he said, "Okay, FN, you want a military handgun? There you are. Oh, Colt, you want a pocket handgun? Here you are." And it was really, really smart how he did that, and how he really took advantage of his brain, the way it worked, and also the contracts he had with Colt and FN. But the 1903 is a really unique pistol, and I think one of our core memories, you and I's core memories, is when I discovered the patent. Uh, we'll say the patent nomenclature,
Yep.
because as someone who really is into vintage handguns, I like to understand, and I like to tell people that the 1911 was not a gun designed to be cocked and locked. It was not a gun designed to be carried cocked and locked. They're very, very clear about that in early
Mm-hmm.
documents and early training manuals. Holsters, even at the time period when the 1911 came out, would not,
No, they
the
prohibit that type of carry.
holsters,
Yeah.
yeah, they would not close with the hammer back. So it's important to know. Excuse me. It's important to know that this gun was not carried cocked and locked. And for a long time, I thought cocked and locked, the verbiage came out of the Cooper school of thought in the post-war era, right? Cocked and locked does not sound like something that's pre-war, in my opinion. I mean, does this? I mean, you've read a lot of pre-war stuff. I
No,
don't think
it
that
doesn't have
sounds.
that kind of that has, like you said, like kind of like 50s, 60s, kind of like
Yeah,
post-war, everyone modifying kind of. It really
sure.
does feel like that Western return kind of nomenclature where people are using a particular type of jargon, and but no, it's John Moses Browning.
John Moses Browning, yes, he has in the document, in the patent document for the 1903, because the 1903, of course, so let's back up just a hair. The 1903 is a concealed hammer. There is a hammer. It's called the hammerless. That was a marketing thing. It is a single action pistol with a hammer. It has to be cocked, which is done by a rack and slide, of course. In the true Browning fashion, he wants parts to work for multiple things,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just be singular. So the thumb safety is more or less. It's gonna also be your hammer indicator, because the
Yep.
thumb safety will not engage if the hammer is not cocked,
Yep.
right? So if the hammer's up, the thumb safety won't engage. So
And he
okay,
mentions that in the patent doc too, right? He makes it
he
very
does.
clear that it's meant to be not necessarily a chamber loaded indicator, but a hammer indicator. It
It's a
lets you
hammer
know that
indicator.
the hammer's back, right?
Right, of course, because we're coming out of a time period of revolvers, and the big autos that do succeed, with the exception of a few striker fired guns, of course, are primarily hammer fired guns.
Yep.
So there's always that. Okay, I can see, you
Yep.
know, I can see that my hammer is cocked, right? Much in the same way that on the Luger, which is a striker fired gun, there's a big emphasis on having a loaded chamber indicator. And they do, of course, because they want to make sure if the gun is
Sure.
loaded / cocked, of course. So, anyways, with that out of the way, in the patent, John Browning says that this gun is intended to be carried cocked and locked. Therefore, a round in the chamber, the safety on, and the safety / hammer indicator
Mm-hmm.
on, with the hammer cocked. And that is, cocked and locked is the actual term used to describe that action, which I literally lost my mind when I read
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah, and it's just so cool, man. I think it emphasizes, and I think it's why you and I like attach so tightly to the pocket autos, because I really think they're the genesis of the gun community that exists today, like 100%. And also, I think the burgeoning era of this gun design that we're talking about, I think not only informs the era that we currently have, but it supersedes the vast majority of the era that we currently have. These are firearms that are coming out of the minds of savants and are really defining. We're in the middle school era of history right now, in my opinion. Like, aside from like between the 30s and the 80s, some crazy stuff happened in the world of firearms, and now we're just kind of like figuring out like the little middling things of it. Like when we were both working at Gun Counter, serious debates on whether key mod made sense or M-lock. Like that was, the attachment mechanism for your rifle was the big hot topic of the day, which it's because we kind of figured everything else out. The guns existed and they were really well designed, and now we're just either butchering them or just doing boring replicas of the same thing.
Well, and it's interesting you talk about that too, because I think people nowadays, they don't have any concept of gunfighting or gun use in the early years of automatics, especially. They certainly have no concept of it prior to probably the 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thinks
aside from like what what they might see in a John Wayne movie, and that's just the assumed,
exactly.
and that's just the assumed clause, right? Like, okay,
which
cool,
is
yeah,
historically insanely inaccurate.
In our hearts, we want it to be.
Right. Like listen, I'm a John Wayne fan if there ever was one, but it's just not historically accurate. But we've had, in a little bit of sidebar, we've had that conversation. I don't really care about historical accuracy in movies. I watch a movie to be entertained, and as long as it isn't like blatantly like rewriting history, I'm kind of okay with that. But anyways, this is besides the point. People don't understand 32 automatic. You show some tactical a 1903 pocket hammerless, right? And they're thinking, oh, that old gun, that can't be carried. You don't understand. That was, and I can't believe I'm going to say this because it's even burning my brain to say it. That was the Glock 19 of its day.
It was just the 32 the standard gun, yeah.
The 32 auto was the way that 9mm is today. And let's say, and conversely, let's say you want, you say, oh, well, I have my 9mm I carry, and I want a 380 to throw in my pocket or have for deeper concealment. That's the 25 auto.
Yeah. 32-25 was that. And it's funny because there wasn't much in between. So in the same way, Browning had those two guns. My two favorites are obviously outside of the Browning world of the Bond ones that I have, right? That are actually following that path directly. You've got the Beretta 25 that's inspired by Ian Fleming's own Browning pocket that he carried back in the day during naval intelligence days, because it was a functional tool that was being carried by folks in those kind of spheres. And then right up to a 32, that was the big upgrade. It was the step up in the right direction, was from a 25 to 32, which a lot of people make fun of today, but made a lot of sense for him just because of the era. It was the round.
And there was a lot of advancements, and I do want to talk about your guns
totally
quickly. But I do want to mention one gun that does not get mentioned enough, and as big a Colt guy as I am, it's kind of crazy, but I really like, and I think this is a really unique gun.
Yes, it is.
The Savage Model 1907. Okay.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Savage Model 1907. This is another, and look, just as I mentioned before with, wanting a hammer indicator, this has a hammer. Or does it? It's not. It's actually striker fired. But the striker is attached to a freaking hammer. So it is striker fired, but still going back to this whole concept of people, we're coming out of revolvers, everything's got a hammer on it. We want to see the hammer cock to know this gun literally attaches a pseudo hammer to its striker mechanism. But the cool thing about the Savage is, and they're about the same size as a 1903, they're actually a little bit shorter. But the cool thing about
which is interesting based on the profile. It looks like a gun that might be larger, but it really is a smaller piece.
Not. It's freaking double stack, man.
Yeah.
1907, and you have 10 rounds of 32 automatic. What? Like, this was essentially, it's the P365 of its day.
Yeah, exactly.
But way cooler. This is so much cooler than a P365. And so I think,
and the whole Savage brand story too, if people aren't familiar with it, is totally one to look up. The guy's a savant. The dude came out of Jamaica. His last name was Savage. He just designed all sorts of crazy guns and really redefined the whole. So much so that like Remington and other brands are duplicating and copying his patents. Really fascinating stuff. I got into the weeds about him and deep level just because in one short story of a Bond novel he carries a 99F. So I kind of did I read this guy's whole biography and stuff, and fascinating stuff. cartridge development, the whole 9 yards, because people really did go all out. And yeah, this guy, not only did he have some really clever internalized magazine roller block like the 99F series, he also had a double stack 32 automatic just on the market.
And that's crazy because I don't think you really saw like a high capacity compact pistol until well in the post-war period.
Well, you think about the post-war era, right? We've talked a little bit about like the Asp before and other pistols. Those came up out of necessity of not having compact pistols in those cartridges, and certainly not double stack. That was something that was kind of a foreign concept. It was more about, we were literally cutting down full-size service pistols to accommodate a compact necessity, right? In the same way that you've got an Armand Swenson gun that was cut down to give people a commander-like gun. Like, it's crazy. It's the kind of thing that really wasn't, this whole debate that we're having today about capacity, and everything that kind of goes along with it is very new. And it's just because it's only because we have the capability, technology, and willingness to do so. So it's kind of not a race to the bottom, but somewhat so, where it's like, at what point does it not matter? I talked to James Williamson about that one in particular quite a bit because of the P7, the HK, P7 development. You and I spoke about this the other day when I was with you, actually, because that gun with that, it's like a gas retarded delayed blowback system, right? And so that piston in the lower part of the frame, essentially, it overheats the gun and burns the hand relatively, so you hear, within like 5 magazines or so. But all of the police use case data at the time said you weren't going to shoot maybe more than a magazine and a half in, I think it was like 80% of shootings. So that was an acceptable thing to do. It was like, okay, well, sub 16 rounds, you're A-okay. Therefore, we will just continue forward with this design. And that, again, in the 80s was a single stack pistol. It took the United States military, actually, coming up with a new contract for them to make it a 10-round gun. They just used an excess piece on there, and then they later on made double stack like the M13 and M8. I think the M8 was double stack, if I remember right. I could be wrong. But they made double stack variants down the line. But all that to say, like 80s and 90s even, most of these guns that we even produced, single stack pistols.
Well, and it is interesting to see how much of again, we don't realize how, and let's be honest, the 1950s is not that far away as far as history goes. I mean, I'm really interested in like Roman and ancient Greek history. That's history that's been a long time. Okay. The 1950s are not that far ago. And so, you have a gun that I think it's extremely interesting was really pretty popular, and essentially is a continuation of, I believe, a Beretta 1914.
1919. Yeah.
Okay. So talk about that gun, because that's cool. That's cool. That gun is cool for a couple of reasons, and I'll let you talk about it. But I will, every single time you show me a picture of that gun or I see that gun, all I can think about is the novel you gave me, him fighting a dude in the it wasn't an aquarium, it was
like, with the sharks and stuff.
It was like, kind of an aquarium, but a commercial based aquarium.
Yep.
Him fighting a dude with a rifle with this gun. And when was that book written? Do you know?
53.
Off the top of my head.
I think it's 53. No, this one was 53, so that'd be 54 or 55.
Yeah, so we're talking the mid 50s, and an absolutely acceptable carry gun is the Beretta. Yours is a 1953. Is that technically the term for it?
Well, it's a Model 418 manufactured in 1953.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So it's one of those things where Beretta, which we've talked about this with the 1903 being like Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, where it's kind of just things changed, and then we kind of added nomenclature as time went on. The Beretta story is very much like that. It initially started with the model 1919, which actually was a larger frame pistol. They had a larger version of that in 32 automatic that then got scaled down into the pocket pistol that became the James Bond carry gun. And so the 25, that was their very first gun in 1919. Again, catching up with the Browning craze of that era. That was their first gun, kind of in that vein. Now, what's interesting is that gun had a lot of aesthetic changes over time, and I do want to get examples of the earlier models just to kind of show the progression, because the 1919 is a lot less ergonomic actually than my 418. My 418 has this kind of beveled magazine. The grip is a little more beveled. The grip safety actually has like an arc to it. The original didn't even have a grip safety. This one actually has a striker primed indicator. The original didn't have that. It was a very stick straight grip, like most handguns back then, where there wasn't really a lot of thought into like fighting gun ergonomics. It was kind of just like, this is where your hand goes, and it also holds the magazine. And that was
You're
kind of
saying
it.
they could have used some Springfield grip zone?
Yes, yeah. I don't know what grip zone is in Italian, but but it's, I know it's not pronounced NFT, but apparently that's what we're doing these
Oh God,
days.
he brought up the NFTs. Oh my gosh, let me tell you right now, I don't know
Well, no, I only bring up the NFT because I'm holding an actual piece of art that physically exists from
that
Beretta.
actually exists.
Yeah,
Gosh, what does it stand for again?
non-fungible token.
See, that don't even make sense to me.
Yeah,
So let's back up.
it's
Let's
like
let's
did you ever see the roast of Tom Brady on Netflix?
I need to
One
watch that.
one of the best jokes on that, which is what immediately I thought of when I was trying to explain NFTs to you the other day, was they made fun of Tom Brady for losing a bunch of money on cryptocurrency, and someone went up there and made fun of Gronk, who's also up there, and he's like, even Gronk, who looks like a caveman's third cousin or whatever, went, even Gronk know that not real money. Which
Well, and a little bit of a sidebar to this conversation, but the Beretta NFT shit, it actually angered me. Like,
it
I
hurt.
actually was physically pissed off because I was like, you make us all look stupid. And I remember commenting some pretty harsh things, and they were obviously they didn't care for that. But it's just one of those stupid. It's crazy. Beretta is the world's oldest firearms
World's
manufacturer.
oldest firearm manufacturer. They have barrels from the 1600s stamped with their name
Isn't
on
that
it.
crazy? It's like, look how far you've come just to do that stupid
Isn't it
shit.
like the meme that circulates, right? That's like, is it Robert E. Lee's great grandson writes like gay vampire fiction? It's like, you fought this so this could happen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? It's like, oh man, like,
like, what an embarrassment to the bloodline.
yeah, because, well, getting back to the gun, right? Talk about how cool I found in my research. Model 418 gold inlay with all hand engraving, the entire gun was with tortoiseshell grips, by the way, with gold PB medallions, was the daily carry of Beretta, of one of the Beretta guys back in the day. That's what he kept on
No
his
way. See,
that's what he kept on his nightstand. Yeah, that was
gangster, dude.
yeah.
Dude,
So
I
it's just
think
such and people complain so much about, like, oh, every time I post this gun, I get 3 comments that are just the Bond quote, oh, nice and light in a lady's handbag. I'm like, this is the coolest gun. Like, it's just so sick.
and it really is cool, and it's cool because you can see its lineage then towards
Oh
the
yeah.
Beretta
Well,
2, which is
you see all the way through. I mean, this is the early days where they had the exposed barrel. It's actually really cool too because it's such a simplified pistol. The extractor slash ejector is actually on the top of the slide. It's all one piece, so it
yeah.
flicks the round up and out the back. The safety operates also as the slide lock, so it has a dual feature as well, similar to what we were talking about with the Browning, right? And then, yeah, over time they actually added a grip safety. The original one was this very large humpback design that was, again, not ergonomic. That's like the 318, and then the early 418s had that. But then they moved that like kind of half moon that actually fits the hand, and then they actually added a palm swell to the bottom of the grip, like they arced so you could get a high grip on this tiny gun. And I actually, I mean, it's probably one of my favorite little pistols, and it's also just a really solid shooter. Like, you can get some really great groups with it, despite the size of the sights, and because of that grip angle, actually, it's like a very natural point and shoot gun. So it's a gun that I actually don't mind carrying, which sounds silly, but it actually, to me, fits a couple of niche use cases, right? So the non-ideal environments, so those places where it's a little more non-permissive potentially, where it might be a little more obvious, but also I found it to be a really great coat. Wearing a large overcoat, you're wearing a larger gun underneath, slip that in the pocket. It's the Rule 1 gun, if you will. It just slides right in, and it's awesome. It's really cool. There's another gun I want to do for that sooner than later. It was actually what I meant to do with this police positive, which was cut it down, per the Casino
Don't
Royale
cut
thing,
that
trim the
gun
barrel.
down.
But this gun is too perfect for that. But all that to say, yeah, the Beretta 418 is a really cool gun. It's just so cool, and it's a beautiful, beautiful gun, dude. Like, it just kind of captures the imagination. It's one that I smile about every time I put in the hand. It's actually, unlike the Colt 25s, which you can get like a finger and a half on, you can actually get a reasonable amount
Yeah,
of real estate on this grip.
the Colt 1908 is a super tiny gun. And talking about pocket guns, in my opinion, especially 32-25s, because we don't need to get into more modern pocket guns. I'm just not interested. In my opinion, one of the last big developments in pocket guns, actually, and I can't believe I'm the one kind of starting this conversation, comes with the Walther PPK.
Absolutely.
Because the Walther PPK is just big enough where I almost consider it a pocket gun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Milt Sparks makes pocket holsters for it and did back in the day. So.
So I do consider the PPK to be like that kind of. It's like, how big can we make the concealed gun? And more importantly, though, you did see a super emphasis on the safety of that pistol compared
Yeah,
to other
absolutely.
guns.
Absolutely. So the
Because
striker.
like 1903, not drop safe in
No.
any possible understanding of the word. Not drop safe. Do I still carry it? Yeah, damn right I do.
Yeah.
But you just have to understand that's on the table. The PPK, though, very interesting in the safe action features that it has. Especially, when was the PPK? When did it come out? The 30s, mid 30s.
Yeah, 31. So,
That's, I mean, it's
but
pretty
the
revolutionary.
the design came out in 29 with the full size variant, the PP, and then within
Yep.
a year and a half or so, they started shipping out the PPK series. But no, it really is a very revolutionary gun, and it comes from that exact same time frame that we were just talking about. There's a lot of debate on whether or not the PPKs are entirely drop safe, but I think that's most guns of that era with the firing pin and stuff.
Sure, absolutely.
But the big issue of the time, and what the PPK and the Walther PP were really trying to solve, was a lot of these striker-fired automatics of the time were tying it all back in with the modern day things. It's like the 320 or the 365. You bump that striker wrong, and you put around somewhere that you definitely didn't mean to. And that was a huge concern. People really wanted to be safe, especially with a gun like a vest gun that's sitting right there, right? It's not an ideal thing to just have discharge on you when you bump into a door frame accidentally, let's say. And so, Carl Walther really went all in on the safety mechanisms of this gun. It is the first double single hammer fired pistol that also has a decocking lever that doubles as a safety. So again, speaking about mechanisms having dual function, the safety lever is also a decocker, so you take it right into double action when you put the safe on. And what's fascinating about that whole thing too is they had that patented. I think I've told you this story, and it's one of my favorites. Is Mauser actually replicated the decocker function of that safety with the HSC pistol, another cool 32, very much in the same design vein as the PPK. And during the war, Walther actually successfully sued Mauser for patent infringement because they had a live patent on a decocker safety combo. And so Germany's losing the war by the mid 40s. It's not looking great. And the Walther family's like, but you violated our patent. So I actually have a later war HSC that can shoot double single, but you cannot decock it because the decocking functions of the safety, they had to ship them without the decocker because the patent was violated and they won the case in court. So they carried on with it. You carry that gun cocked and locked. If you cock it, you can throw
That's
the safety
crazy
on.
that they even
Took it to court in
up.
wartime. Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that's like I could never imagine, and I'm sure it happened, but like an American manufacturer doing that, like.
Well, especially, we're talking about like federal control of production during wartime, like the 1917 revolvers and little things kind of getting slipped into there. And, people weren't thrilled about having their designs be manufactured by other people, but that's what happened because it was wartime. And it's interesting to me that in brown coat Germany that happened, and it happened successfully. But yeah, the PPK is one of the safest action pistols on the market, and it actually really cool thing that Walther did is soon after the launch of the 32 and 380 models, they followed it up with a 22 variant and a 4.2 millimeter in-home training drop-in barrel. And they had all this advertisement that I translated from German. It's so cool. Literally encouraging users to buy the 22 variant of the same gun, same size, and same manufacturing quality. It's not like today where the 22 PPKS is made over in Germany by Umarex, and it kind of has a really stiff double action trigger and doesn't really feel like the PPK. These were the exact same guns, same bluing, whole 9 yards. And they had advertising that said, learn how to shoot your gun, train more consistently on a budget. So they were encouraging people to buy the 22, or you could buy a 4.2 millimeter drop-in with a little trap, and you could shoot in your basement. And they had little beautiful illustrated brochures explaining how to do that. And so I think it was, for me, it was a fascinating thing to learn as a very revolutionary thing, where people today doing that a lot more commonly, right? Like you can name most manufacturers and they either have a drop-in 22 training barrel, bolt carrier group, or training gun that you can pick up to get more competent firearm on a budget. Walther pioneered that in the 30s.
Yeah, that is cool. Colt would actually do the Ace in the 30s too.
Yes.
So that's pretty interesting. That was something that was even considered at that time, because we don't really think of people of that time period being like heavy shooters.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there were
well, and people don't really think about people doing inexpensive training either, because in their brain these are military arms, and so when you're taxpayer funded, you're not worried about shooting on a budget. You're shooting the centerfire cartridge.
Yep.
These were guns built for civilians so they could get competent with their defensive pistols.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dude, yeah, the world, as big a proponent of 45 and big caliber or big handguns as I am, there is an elegance to a pocket pistol. A little bit on the style side. There are plenty of outfits where, especially if you have, like, let's say you're dressing for a nice occasion, you decide to have a tapered jacket, or a fitted jacket. A lot of times a 1911 or a model 29 3-inch 29, those big, what we would say fighting guns, they're not going to work. I mean, it is not going to work.
It doesn't suit cocktail attire, if you will. And I think another good example, the way that I could see you rocking it, right? 1903 on the appendix while wearing like a vest and a jacket.
Yep.
You run a lot warmer than I do. You'll probably have to lose a jacket, which means that shoulder holsters sometimes don't accommodate what you need. So having an additional just cover garment and a thinner pistol, because again, that's not a cover garment that has a lot of real estate. It's a pretty fitted garment, but you could get, or under a cummerbund, right? You could get one of these pocket autos on the appendix right there very easily.
I've actually, and you make a good point too. I mean, this is things that people have to keep in mind. The temperature you run at. Okay, you're going to a formal event. You're someone that gets hot pretty easily and sweats pretty quickly, like myself. That jacket ain't staying on. It's just not.
No matter how light the linen, the fabric you have, it's just not going to happen.
And you're someone that can stay in a jacket pretty much all day. You don't sweat a lot. So I have actually, there have been a few occasions I've been at where I was wearing a suit with a vest, and I actually had the 25 ACP Colt 1908 in the vest pocket. I mean, truly what it was named after, in the vest pocket. And, not my favorite, handgun to stick on, of course, but, it is a gun. You are armed to some degree.
Well, another example like that for me, right, is I had a wedding recently where it was black tie. So I was in a tuxedo, and that's very fitted, and it was in the early summer, so it was also very warm. And so my solution for that was exactly what you just mentioned. I took this Beretta 25, put it in a friction holster, and actually put it behind my dress shirt. So I tucked around the gun, but it's so flat, no one knew it was there, and it's easy enough to draw by just ripping that shirt out of the waistband. And also, deep concealment, you're not looking for that split-second draw. It's just having the tool and keeping your wits about you kind of situation. But it's, again, a lot better than not having anything.
Well, and I think we have to be adults about things, and there are some places that are lower risk of using a firearm. And absolutely. I would say weddings are probably one of those. I got in trouble at the last wedding I was at because I was carrying a Colt, my 1919 Colt that Nighthawk had built, and it has that lanyard loop. And all the groomsmen are kind of crowded, waiting on. I think we were waiting on them to switch over from where they were for the ceremony to where the reception was going to be, because it was an outdoor wedding, of course, but we were in a house, and all the groomsmen are in there, and they're all they're almost I think I was the youngest one there. So they're all in their late 20s to mid 30s. I think one actually was in his late 30s. And I don't drink ever, never have, never will, don't have any use for it, would rather buy guns. So they're passing out beers, right? And nobody has a bottle opener. So they're thinking, well, maybe we'll hit them off the side of the desk, or they're trying to do, like, one of the dudes was trying to do something with his dip can. I said, hold your horses, y'all. I pull out my 45, obviously pointing in a safe direction, for those who might be watching. I cleared it. I did clear it. I cleared the 45, but I put the magazine back halfway in, and I just started a train of popping the bottles with the lanyard loop on the 45. And the mama of the bride walked in and saw me just cranking,
beers off of a handgun.
Beers off with a handgun, and was not super thrilled with that. But it's one of those things. But you won't always, that's the only time I've ever unholstered my gun at a wedding.
Yeah, there's also very different situations, right? Like you're in a territory where, like, a barbecue gun or like an outside the waistband wedding gun is probably a little more acceptable.
Sure.
I'm in an
Yes.
area where that would not be acceptable, even in the slightest. Even my own wedding, it was very, like, quiet thing that I was carrying a gun. I didn't really make a big to-do about it.
Right, where we are, having, and I even made a big point, like, and again, we weren't in like a tux,
Sure.
set. I mean, this was an outdoor wedding on the family's cattle farm. Okay,
Right.
so I was actually carrying the 45 in a Milt Sparks carved rig. Little flex on everybody.
Spectacular.
But I mean, I remember, the weeks before, the groom, who is one of my best friends, and I was there was two groomsmen. Two best men. One of them is like a married version. One of them is a single version, or the not married version. And then the girl had the
matron,
maid of honor, maid and matron of honor kind of deal. So, anyways, he kind of said, I said, well, what gun? Because he's into guns. He's not into cool guns, but he's into guns. So, well, what gun are you wearing? Oh, I guess I'll just have my Glock on. And I just couldn't stand for it. And so I said, well, you're not carrying no damn Glock to get married. And I gave him a Colt 1911 before we walked out there, because he ought to own a 1911 45 of some caliber, of some degree, of some manufacturer in your life as an American. I think everyone should have at least a Colt, but in your case, you have an Alchemy, so that's just that works.
Yeah. We'll take the win.
But he carried a Colt 1911 at his wedding, and a lot of the groomsmen and the best man, both of the best men, myself and the other guy, we were both carrying 1911s. I don't remember what his was, but it's one of those things where I'm from, and you make a good point. Where I'm from, it's not, if somebody sees your gun, it's not a big deal. Like when I was out on the dance floor, getting my boogie on, I didn't have a jacket on, and I had my 45 on in a Milt Sparks holster.
With a mag carrier on the other side, too, I'm sure.
With mag carrier on the other side. And this girl, and it happens every damn time I wear a freaking Milt Sparks holster. Some old girl comes up to me, tries to put some moves on me, and I have to, give them the old, give them the old, hey now, watch out. I got a chick. So, which is why I admirably call Milt Sparks MILF Sparks, because it has never failed that every single time I've ever wore a 1AT that I've been hit on in some capacity. Every time.
If that's not a sales pitch for the rig, I don't know what could be.
And they don't even advertise the rig on their website. In fact, they were kind of like, well, if we don't sell anymore, that's fine because it's an expensive rig to make. And well, they've definitely had to make more rigs because of me, because I think that is the best holster of all time. But anyways,
well, I think Milt Sparks is a really nice place to kind of like start tapering off the conversation as we roll up to our hour mark here, right?
Yeah,
because I think they are the obviously beautiful leather. I was actually finally able to carry with one when I was visiting you. I borrowed one of your straight drop rigs for the 45 because I was carrying my Alchemy while I was with you, and I have one on order. So I was just like, hey, I want to make sure the straight drop makes sense because, as you know, I carry at a light can't just because of my body shape and being able to conceal. But the Summer Special One is, to me, the definitive pocket automatic holster, and for a elegant 32 automatic pistol, it's the holster you need. I've got one coming in for the PPK, and one really cool thing that I hadn't really seen too much of before, and I didn't really know about till I went to their website, was their inside the waistband spare magazine carriers. So
yes.
I have one of those on order to go with the PPK. So I've got a PPK Summer Special 1 and that. It's going to be an amazing daily carry setup. It's just, so yeah, get yourself a certified used pocket auto.
And by the way, Milt Sparks is not at all a
Oh
sponsor,
no.
but we would love to have them as a sponsor.
But
I love Milt Sparks. I'm a big Milt Sparks fan, always will be. But that's a perfect. I think if we bring up one more topic, we'll be here another hour. So let's
we have a
call
commitment
it.
to keep it right here. So
Right.
thanks for letting us ramble at you guys for a little bit here today about one of our favorite topics. We've been talking about about how this needs to be a renaissance and how people need to celebrate these rounds again and enjoy these guns and carry them. And this is another warning that the crusade will continue.
That's right. It's never over. Anywho, thank y'all so much for joining us on Steel and Style. Make sure you check out Gun's website for some certified used. We certainly appreciate all your support if you let them know. We don't have a code as of yet, but just if there's any way you can let them know, let them know. You heard about it from here. And yeah, with that, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. And always remember, carry cocked and locked.
Cheers, guys.